America in the 1960s was divided, strained under violent confrontations over the future of civil rights. As activists marched to redeem the country's founding vision of equality, the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover spied on and threatened leaders it considered national threats. At the heart of this divide stood Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Hoover, an ideological clash between good and evil personified in two men who deeply shaped America's character. Their fatal conflict would determine whether peaceful calls for change or authoritarian demands for order would triumph. Martin Luther King Jr. rose to prominence on the righteousness of a dream that one day this nation would rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal. His vision of racial harmony and equal justice under the law attracted followers nationwide, particularly the youth of the civil rights movement. Peaceful student sit-ins, freedom rides, and a march on Washington addressed the unfulfilled promises made to black citizens after the Civil War. King's gift for oratory and strategic adoption of civil disobedience in the tradition of Gandhi made him the symbolic leader of a generation's fight for freedom from discrimination. J. Edgar Hoover, meanwhile, saw disorder and crime running rampant as radical groups gained ground. His FBI amassed vast surveillance powers under the pretense of internal security threats. Hoover focused suspicion on Martin Luther King as a supposed communist puppet bending naive black populations to un-American activities. Obsessed with secrecy, the authoritarian Hoover ordered illegal wiretaps and microphones planted in King's phones and hotel rooms, while he traveled to support bus boycotts and lunch counter protests across the South. Hoover hoped to find flaws in King's strategizing or personal conduct to enable FBI intimidation campaigns. The conflict intensified in 1963 when King helped organize the March on Washington and made his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, promoting interracial harmony in front of over 200,000 supporters. Here was Hoover's greatest domestic fear brought to life: the mobilization of black Americans to demand reforms. Hoover stepped up efforts to depict King as radical and extreme. FBI informants infiltrated protest events in King's inner circle. When King was awarded the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize, consolidating his reputation of moral leadership, Hoover exploded with bitter accusations of King being a degenerate and the country's most notorious liar. In his relentless pursuit of Martin Luther King Jr., J. Edgar Hoover took on a role similar to the obsessive Inspector Javert from Les Miserables. Like Javert ruthlessly hunting the fugitive Jean Valjean, Hoover saw King as an enemy of stability and order that must be apprehended at all costs. Both Javert and Hoover viewed the world in black and white, unable to see nuance in profound moral causes, only disorder that offended their rigid worldview. They directed the formidable powers of law enforcement against, in truth, righteous individuals fighting injustice through resistance and redemption against the odds. The tragic irony is that in their self-righteous quests, the dogged Javert and zealous Hoover only furthered the legacies of those they deemed enemies of the state. Hoover's agents mailed threats to expose recordings and surveillance they claimed would reveal King's extramarital affairs and other improprieties if he did not stop the civil disobedience campaigns. While King faced private feelings of guilt, anxiety, and fatigue from relentless pressure, he refused to be blackmailed or diverted from the path of nonviolent activism. Despite his best efforts to stop King's ascent as the leader of a mass social justice movement, Hoover's attacks never significantly damaged King's brilliant public profile. Ironically, Hoover's abuses of FBI surveillance only burnished King's global image as a righteous underdog and innocent martyr in later years. In April 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated by a gunman,
to death in Memphis,
a death
Tennessee.
which instantly transformed the minister into an immortal figure of American heroism and martyrdom, intensifying his legend as a righteous leader who gave his life for the moral cause of civil rights. His tragic murder shocked the nation, galvanizing support to carry on King's selfless dream and work towards fulfilling racial equality and justice in his honor. In the fatal conflict between America's warrior of nonviolent resistance, Martin Luther King Jr., and the unscrupulous and corrupt symbol of law and order, J. Edgar Hoover, the dreamer's vision ultimately prevailed while the abusive enforcer's legacy sank. King had sacrificed everything to redeem the promise of equality before the law. In contrast, Hoover sacrificed true justice and morality to answer his call for stability, preserving a status quo of oppression at any cost. This has been a retelling of the dramatic clash between towering 20th century titans, one man shining as a beacon for human rights, while the other shrouded civil liberties in darkness. Martin Luther King Jr. called on the nation's conscience and the ideals of its founding fathers, wielding only words and principles as his weapons. J. Edgar Hoover hid behind the formidable power of the FBI, ruthlessly seeking to crush dissent and maintain his autocratic vision of stability at any price. Their larger-than-life battle intertwined with so many struggles still gripping America: the quest for racial justice, defiance of unjust laws, the ethics of law and order against unchecked power. In Invisible Legends Reimagined, this epic confrontation between courageous activist and authoritarian oppressor is resurrected in striking detail, bringing to light the best and worst of America colliding in an age defined by change. Their fatal conflict shaped the course of history and still echoes today as we wrestle with upholding equality and democracy against injustice.